Early morning on the 27th of May 2024, San Diego was eerily quiet. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the hospital window, falling on the gaunt face, silver hair, and trembling hands of Bill Walton, the giant who once shook the world of American basketball. His breathing grew weaker, each breath like the soft lapping of distant waves on the shore, weary yet serene. Outside, the sun-drenched street still hummed with the sound of bicycles, the paths he used to pedal through every morning, greeting strangers with his wide-open smile. Now, all sounds fell silent. The sad news spread like the wind, and in just minutes, from the UCLA boardroom, the Portland Trail Blazers hallways to Boston Garden, photos and number 32 jerseys hung askew in silence. In the places where thousands once cheered his name, now only the wind whistled through empty stands, carrying a question no one dared answer. How could a heart that once beat for millions stop so quietly? Bill Walton fought to his last breath against colorectal cancer, the disease that imprisoned him in pain but could not subdue his spirit. He did not complain or lament. In his final months, people still saw him smiling at nurses, asking doctors questions, offering thanks as if it were a sacred ritual. When the news was confirmed, ESPN cut the music and replayed his last interview. "I've lived a beautiful life. I'm the luckiest man in the world." At UCLA, people placed a bouquet of flowers beneath his bronze statue, under the hands that once lifted the NCAA championship trophy. In Portland, they lit candles around his 1977 photo, when he had a red beard, long hair, beaming as he hugged the Larry O'Brien trophy like the faith of an entire city. In Boston, Celtics fans donned their 1,986 green jerseys again, standing silently for hours before the memorial wall. And in San Diego, where he spent his final years, Lori, his faithful wife, still sat by the hospital bed, clutching his hand until the very last moment. A slow voice rose like a farewell. He used to be the tallest man in the room, but today, the sky bowed low to see him off. For Bill Walton was not just a basketball player. He was a symbol of resilience, of faith in life, of a light that never dimmed even when surrounded by darkness. And when the final whistle of his life sounded, America bowed its head not just because a legend had passed, but because a man had taught them how to live, how to endure, and how to smile even when pain overflowed. La Mesa, California, the 1,950 seconds. A small town steeped in the smell of hot iron and road dust. In the old wooden house at the end of a narrow street, a red-haired boy with bright eyes and a gangly frame named Bill Walton sat silently by the window. He said nothing, not because there was nothing to say, but because every time he opened his mouth, the words stumbled, caught in his throat, and dissolved amid his friends' laughter. "The stutterer!" the kids teased. On some summer afternoons, that laughter chased him all the way home, more persistent than the cicadas. The fear of speaking grew into an invisible shackle around his neck, making him avoid eye contact, avoid answering, avoid even breathing too loudly, afraid people would notice he existed. His father, Ted Walton, was a strict music teacher. He believed in discipline, in the precise sound of every note, in his son being strong. His mother, Gloria, the high school librarian, was quiet and gentle. She read books to her children, believing words could save souls. But in that small house, amid the bookshelves and sheet music, silence was the dominant sound. The family wasn't rich, just getting by. Everything in the house bore the mark of thrift. The old radio, his father's repeatedly mended shoes, the chipped wooden piano. Bill grew up in an atmosphere that was both warm and heavy, where every small mistake could be scrutinized, where love was shown through duty, not hugs, and so he learned to keep everything inside. Some evenings, his father made the kids practice piano. When it was Bill's turn, he demanded, "Speak up, don't hesitate." Bill tried, but his voice cracked. His father frowned, sighed. Bill saw the disappointment slide across his eyes, and from that day Bill hardly spoke again. He retreated into his own world of walls, maps, and the ball. Sometimes, Gloria saw her son holding a half-deflated basketball, throwing it against the house wall hundreds of times in a row. Each time it bounced back, he caught it, threw it, caught it. No one knew that for Bill, it wasn't just a game. It was the only way he could hear his own voice. The sound of the ball slapping the concrete dry, monotonous, but steady like a heartbeat. It was the only thing that didn't mock him, didn't interrupt him, didn't embarrass him. He could talk to the ball and it listened. The summer he turned 13, Bill's shoes had a huge tear at the toe. He still wore them, tying the laces tight with rope, heading to the park court to play alone. The sun blazed, the court cracked, the ball rimmed out and rolled far away. But he picked it up, threw it again. He played until the sun set, until his knees bled, until his hands blistered raw. Some evenings, Gloria searched for her son and found him sitting by a broken hoop, sweat mixed with tears, unable to say a word. He just smiled, nodded, as if to say, "I'm okay, Mom, don't worry." But she knew it wasn't joy, it was defiance. At Helix High School, Bill was still the shy kid in the corner of the classroom. When the teacher called on him to read, he stammered, face flushed red, then sat down amid scattered laughs. But in gym class, everything changed. Coach Frank Graves, the basketball team advisor, first noticed the student taller than everyone else, with long arms, clumsy strides, but eyes that lit up at the sight of the ball. "Walton, give it a try," he said. Bill hesitated, but stepped onto the court. The first time the ball left his hands and swished through the net, Coach Graves clapped not loudly, but enough to fill the empty space of over a dozen years in his heart. It was the first time he was praised, the first time someone believed he had value. That night, Bill couldn't sleep. He went out to the court, looked at the moon, and shot until exhausted. Each shot was his way of saying, "I can do it." From that night, he no longer felt completely mute. But the first light in Bill Walton's life always came after an abyss. He had to fall to the depths of loneliness to find his own voice. And for the rest of his life, whether on the court or in the hospital, Bill carried that sound, the bounce of the ball off the ground, like the heartbeat that never stopped of a boy who once didn't dare speak, but never stopped listening to the world. When Bill Walton stepped onto the UCLA campus in 1970, Los Angeles shimmered in sunlight like a greeting. The shy, red-haired boy from La Mesa now stood in the temple of American college basketball, where every wall was covered in images of victory, and every eye turned to the one who would carry the legend forward. There was John Wooden, the man with a kindly gaze but iron discipline, whom Bill would call his second father until the end. Wooden didn't teach Walton to shoot first. He taught him to tie his shoelaces. "If you're careless with the small things, the big ones will betray you," he said. That phrase became the compass for Bill's entire life, through glory and darkness alike. On the Bruins team, Walton learned more than tactics. He learned ethics. Wooden taught, "Winning isn't beating others, it's becoming the best version of yourself." But for Bill, becoming the best was always a painful journey, both physical and emotional. He loved basketball like breathing, but his body never loved him back the same way. At UCLA, Walton quickly became the brightest star. At nearly 7 feet tall, with hands as supple as a musician's, and the sharp vision of someone who once feared speaking, he spoke with passes. The Bruins entered a golden era, sweeping all opponents. In 1972, they won the NCAA championship. In 1973, they returned and did the impossible. An 88-game winning streak, a number that still makes the basketball world bow its head today. The whole country chanted Bill Walton's name, the red-haired guy playing like he was telling a mythic story. And then came the fateful night in Memphis. The 26th of March 1973, the NCAA final against Memphis State. In Street Lewis Arena, under glaring lights, a crowd of over 19,000 roared. Walton shot 21 times, made 21, 44 points, 13 rebounds, nearly perfect to the point of inhuman. The TV announcer exclaimed, "We're witnessing a god in human form." But right after the final buzzer, as UCLA celebrated, Bill quietly bent down, hugged his knees, sweat mixing with tears. He'd been in pain since the second half, but kept playing. "Don't disappoint Coach," he told himself. The first foot spasms appeared. The doctor said it might just be mild inflammation, but Bill knew better. He felt tiny cracks forming in his bones day by day. He kept it secret. No one could know, not Wooden, not teammates, not parents. He feared they'd bench him. And for Bill, not playing was scarier than the pain. After the Memphis win, UCLA stayed undefeated. Each game was a perfect symphony. Ball through Walton's hands, to teammates, back to Walton's smooth, sure, and points appeared. But after every jump, every landing, came a stab of pain. First in the ankle, then the knee, then the back. He woke each morning feeling like iron needles pierced his feet. But he didn't say, because he believed in Wooden, believed in the virtue of endurance. "If I'm in pain, I'll learn to play with it," he once said. Later, Bill recalled, "My UCLA years were the happiest time, and when I started dying slowly. Hidden beneath the glorious wins was a body betraying its owner. He became a winning machine trapped in a cracking shell." Sometimes, on nights back at the dorm, teammates partied while Bill lay still, listening to Grateful Dead on a small radio. The music took him to another world, no cheers, no pressure, just gentle drum beats like a heartbeat. Once, Wooden visited his room and saw his student alone. He asked, "You okay?" Bill smiled, said, "I'm fine, Coach." But inside, everything was starting to crack. Amid the glamour, he felt lonely, the loneliness only those at the peak understand. Admired by all, but no one truly knew what he endured. In 1974, UCLA lost to NC State in the semis. The 88-game streak ended. The nation was shocked, and Bill sat silently in the locker room, staring at his swollen feet. He knew this wasn't just a sports loss, but a harbinger of something bigger. Light came at a price. In the months after, he underwent constant treatment, lost feeling in his feet, but was still picked first in the NBA draft. Wooden hugged him long, whispering, "You don't need to prove anything more, Bill. Just live kindly." The coach's words became his lifelong mantra, but basketball doesn't forgive. Sports waits for no one. At its brightest, light burns fastest. Amid the applause, Bill Walton, the red-haired guy who once didn't dare speak, was now the center of the world. But inside, a small voice began, "Will there come a day when I can't walk anymore?" He didn't answer. He just tightened his shoes, laced them firm like Coach Wooden's first lesson, then stepped onto the court, pretending everything was fine. No one knew that in those powerful strides, tiny bones under his skin were fracturing, like the first cracks in a monument not yet complete. And at that peak, tragedy began to breathe silently but surely like a sad melody hidden amid victory cheers. Portland, Oregon, 1977. The city of drizzle and damp pine forests, where steep streets led to the Willamette River glittering with golden lights. There, a miracle was unfolding. After his brilliant UCLA years, Bill Walton, the red-haired guy once shy in class, had transformed into the king of the Blazers, the icon of a young team and a city craving hope. Under the damp lights of Memorial Coliseum, Portland fans' cheers blended with squeaking sneakers on wood, creating a living orchestra, and Bill Walton was the conductor. In the 1976-77 season, he led that young team through all doubts, beating giants like the Lakers, Bulls, and finally Julius Erving's Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA Finals. 6 games like a war between two worlds. Light versus darkness, underdog versus glitzy empire. In Game 6, Walton played like heaven sent. 20 points, 23 rebounds, 8 blocks, 7 assists. When the final buzzer sounded and the Blazers lifted their first ever Larry O'Brien trophy, Bill hugged teammates, tears mixing with sweat. Fans flooded the streets, chanting, "Bill, Bill, Bill, Bill," that sound erasing every childhood taunt of the stutterer. In that moment, he was no longer the shy boy, no longer the one who trembled speaking to crowds. He was the king of Portland, the soul of a forgotten city. The next season, 1977-78, he kept going, playing basketball so perfect the press called him Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's heir, the future of the NBA. And as predicted, he won league MVP, hailed across America. At 25, Bill Walton stood at the glory peak every athlete dreams of: talent, intellect, loved, respected. But amid the cheers, the old pain quietly returned. One morning in the locker room, he felt a soft crack under his left foot. At first just a twinge, then burning, then numbing cold. The medical staff diagnosed navicular fracture, the rarest and most dangerous foot bone break. Bill went silent. He'd heard of it. It doesn't kill you, but kills your career. All season, he shuttled to hospitals. The name Bill Walton still graced Sports Illustrated covers, but beneath the glow, he was just a man in a cast, lying still in bed, watching light through the window. Each time the cast came off, he tried to stand, but pain knocked him down like a knife to the bone. Painkillers became companions, then conquerors of his thoughts. On quiet Portland nights, Walton's apartment stayed lit. He sat by the window, casted foot propped on a chair, small radio playing Grateful Dead, the band he loved like a religion. Ripple played lyrics. Let it be known there is a fountain that was not made by the hands of men. Bill closed his eyes. Tears fell. I have everything, he told himself, except freedom. In that darkness, he understood the worst pain wasn't broken bones, but imprisonment inside his own body. Worse, amid the pain, loneliness turned to doubt. He clashed with the Blazers' medical staff. Bill believed they'd pushed him to play unhealed, worsening the injury. They called him oversensitive, weak. Media swarmed, dividing fans. He, the king of Portland, suddenly became the scapegoat. In a rare interview, Bill spoke slowly, voice choked. They don't see me as a human. They see me as property. Those words cut like a knife through the city's faith. From Star Peak, he became the betrayer. Papers that once praised now doubted. Some fans sent hate mail, calling him the fragile king. Bill didn't respond. He withdrew, crutched around, unplugged the phone, cut ties. The day the Blazers started the new season without him, he quietly went to the arena, stood outside, watching teammates warm up. Sneakers squeaks the sound he loved all his life, now twisted like a knife in his heart. He sat in a seat, casted feet, hands clenched till bloody. No one spoke to him. When lights dimmed, he stayed, unmoving. A janitor saw and asked, "Need help?" He just shook his head. Then he limped to the door, looked back once at the empty stands, like looking at his youth closing. The years after, endless surgeries. 5, then 7, then 9. Each one a new scar, a bit less faith. Some nights, pain dragged on till he screamed, but no one heard in the soundproof apartment. Lori, then just an acquaintance from an event, recalled, "I once saw him sit for hours just staring out the window, eyes empty, like he was talking to someone no one else could see. That someone, perhaps himself, healthy, running the court, smiling at fans, passing to teammates. But that self stayed in 1978. In 1979, Bill Walton left Portland. He called it his most painful goodbye, not for losing the contract, but losing trust. I love Portland, but they don't believe me anymore. They think I'm faking the pain. Those words echoed in a small meeting room, stunning the basketball world. People didn't know whether to pity or blame him, and Bill, closing the door, saw only himself and darkness. At his peak, he was America's pride, but one bone crack, and it all shattered. Medals, titles, golden trophies, none helped him stand. Once, The next Kareem, now the long-term injury player, from hero to tragic icon, and as Portland nights drowned in rain, in the small riverside apartment, Bill Walton sat by the window, casted foot on the chair arm, Grateful Dead still playing softly. Wind slipped through the night, stirring thin curtains. He closed his eyes, whispered, "I don't know if I can play anymore, but if I can, I want to play without pain." It wasn't just an athlete's prayer, it was the cry of a man who'd touched heaven, now falling, seeking his soul amid the agony. The crown remained, but inside, the king was broken. In 1985, when it seemed his career was buried in the ashes of injuries and disappointment, the Boston Celtics unexpectedly opened their arms. Red Auerbach, the legendary architect of the team, who once believed only in discipline and victory, called Bill Walton, his voice raspy but warm. "You still have something to give." On the other end of the line, Bill let out a soft laugh. He hadn't heard "you're still useful" in years. Without hesitation, he replied, "If Boston believes in me, I'll believe in myself." And so, after nearly a decade of wandering, unfinished seasons, and unhealed scars, Bill Walton packed his suitcase and headed to Massachusetts, where winters were harsh, but fans' hearts always burned bright. When Bill stepped into the Celtics locker room, Larry Bird, at the peak of world basketball, looked at him, extended his hand. "We need you." A simple sentence, but to Bill, it was like a rebirth potion. After years of being seen as the broken ex-king, now he was welcomed not as an icon but as part of the family. The 1985-86 season began. At 33, Walton was no longer the dominant center of old, but he had something no one else on the team had: the wisdom of someone who'd been through hell. He no longer fought for every dunk, no longer sought the spotlight. He did what Wooden had taught: make others better. From the bench, he cheered, joked, encouraged teammates. When called in, he passed like breathing, defended like singing, and every minute on court was a gift. Among the green and white giants, he became the quietly beating heart of a perfect machine. And then, spring 1986 arrived, with something no one dared believe. Bill Walton, after all, had returned. He won 6th Man of the Year, and with the Celtics, claimed the NBA championship. In the finals against the Houston Rockets, Boston Garden fans witnessed an unforgettable image. The red-haired man, beaming smile, arms raised while his knees were wrapped in white tape. "I'm coming back to life," he said after the game, "and I know this is a miracle." When the final buzzer sounded, the entire Celtics team rushed to hug each other. Bird, McHale, Parrish, all lost in the roar. Bill, in the midst of teammates' arms, didn't shout, didn't dance, he just stood still, face tilted up to the arena ceiling. From the stands, Ted Walton, his elderly father, who'd taught him rhythm and perseverance, stood abruptly, tears streaming. He'd never cried in front of his son his whole life, but that day he cried, not for the victory, but because he saw his son smiling again. In the Boston Garden locker room, champagne scent filled the air. Music blared. Bill sat in the corner, feet soaking in a bucket of ice, smile still on his lips. When reporters asked his feelings, he replied softly, "I know I'm living in fate's final gift." His body was then dilapidated, every step a negotiation with pain. But he didn't complain. Every morning, when the team practiced, Bill arrived an hour early, lay on the floor, closed his eyes, breathed deeply, stretched his spine. He told Bird, "I don't know when I'll collapse, but before it happens, I want to leave something for this team a little light." And he did. The jumps, the passes, the encouragements all blended into a miraculous basketball spring. But right amid that light, the price of the miracle began to be collected. At season's end, pain spread to the sciatic nerve. Some nights, Bill lay motionless in the hotel room, unable to turn. Lori, the woman who would stay with him for life, later recalled, "He smiled, but his body trembled. He told me, 'Don't call the doctor, tonight I just need to know I can still feel.' Pain was the only thing letting him know he was still alive. Summer 1986. Bill Walton knew. His body forgave no more. Doctors advised rest, another surgery, but he refused. If I lie down again, I'll never get up. He chose to fade slowly, quietly, without drama. The last time stepping out of Boston Garden, he paused in the aisle, looked at thousands of empty seats, golden lights reflecting on the floor. He remembered 1,977 inches Portland, UCLA, wooden, and whispered to himself, "Pain won, but at least I left light." That phrase later became his life's epitaph, a man broken by pain, but who bowed to give the world his best. For Bill Walton, 1986 was not just a championship, it was the final spring of a body that had endured too much, a song of thanks he sent to heaven before darkness returned. After that glorious night, his back was never the same, but his soul had never shone brighter. The 1,990 seconds, as the basketball world entered a new era, Bill Walton, the one who once rampaged like a red flame on court, quietly vanished from the light. The chronic back pain, smoldering for years, now erupted fiercely like a beast caged too long. At first, just numbness down the spine each morning wake-up. Then it spread to hips, legs, making him unable to bend, unable to sit, unable to stand long. Every movement a knife stab. I was like clamped between two hot steel plates, he described later, and every breath was fire. Doctors said it was total disc collapse, result of decades of collisions, falls, and stubbornness. He could no longer walk normally. Those who'd seen Bill tall and striding through crowds couldn't believe when he said just to get out of bed, he had to crawl. For months, he slept no more than 10 minutes at a time because pain woke him with electric shocks from spine to feet. The San Diego room, once full of laughter, now held only yellow lamplight and the hum of the heater. On the walls, photos of him in Celtics and UCLA jerseys hung neatly, like fragments of a distant life. "I'm no longer me," he wrote in his journal. "I'm a prisoner, and my body is the jail." Some mornings, Laurie went to work. He lay alone, eyes on the ceiling, unable to move. Even a cough tore him like ripping. Friends called. He pretended fine, voice still cheerful, still laughing, but when hanging up, tears fell. He thought of death, not from fear, but exhaustion of living. "I wanted to end it. I couldn't bear every breath being fire," he said in an interview years later. There was a time. He wrote a short letter, not a suicide note, but an apology to loved ones. "If I leave, please remember I was grateful. I just can't take more." But like every time in life, Bill Walton didn't surrender. In 2008, when the condition became hopeless, he met a neurosurgeon in California who said there was still a chance, though slim. The surgery would last over 8 hours, opening his entire back, inserting 2 titanium rods along the spine and securing with dozens of screws. Hearing that, Bill just nodded. "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of living unable to stand." February 2009, he entered the operating room. When he woke, he felt nothing but overwhelming pain, like his whole body forged in fire. He couldn't move, couldn't turn himself. But this time, the pain didn't make him despair, it was a sign of hope, because he knew he could still feel. The early days of recovery were true hell. Hundreds of days just to practice sitting up, then standing, then one step. Each day, he sweated, trembled, screamed, but tried. Some days he collapsed. Doctors said rest. But next day he demanded to try again. And then, one June morning in 2009, as sunlight flooded the rehab room window, Bill Walton took his first 2 steps in years. He sobbed like a child, hugged the physical therapist, tears hitting the floor. "I was in hell," he said, "and I learned hell has dawned." From then, every step was a miracle. Each day, he practiced standing longer, breathing, smiling. The titanium spine in his back clicked with every move, like a cold metallic song, but he loved that sound. It proved he was still here. No more court, no more flashbulbs, no more cheers. Just the 5, 6-year-old tall man, silver beard, standing before the mirror, slowly stepping and smiling. He said that for the first time in decades, he felt grateful even for the pain. "Pain reminds me I'm alive," he wrote. "If I can still feel it, I haven't been defeated." As his body gradually recovered, Bill Walton began talking to other patients in the treatment center. They recognized him, the NBA legend, but were surprised he didn't talk glory, only how to breathe through pain. He told them about Wooden, about Larry Bird, about the shoelace lesson, and said, "Even when you can't walk, you can still move forward in your soul." Someone asked, "Do you regret paying such a high price for basketball?" Bill just smiled. "No, no regrets. Without basketball, I'd never know how strong I am." In 2010, he could walk normally, not fast, not straight, but free. He went to San Diego Beach, where wind tousled his silver hair, and told Lori, "I once thought this was a place to end. Turns out, it's a place to start over." That sentence was the declaration of a soul that had touched bottom, wanted to let go, but chose to turn pain into gratitude. He began charity events, talking mental health, encouraging ex-athletes not to hide their pain. He understood, true hell isn't in illness, but in losing faith in life's value. Bill Walton once said in an interview, "I stood at the world's peak, then fell so deep I thought I couldn't surface. But right there, I met my true self." In that voice was no longer the legend's tone, but a man who died in soul and reborn through willpower. He no longer wanted acclaim, just to walk, breathe, thank life for one more dawn. And when asked what kept him alive, he just laughed. Music, friends, and faith that no night lasts forever. Looking back, the journey from UCLA star to the man with a spine full of screws wasn't tragedy, but witness to indomitability. Bill Walton went through hell, but he didn't bring its fire. He brought light from after the flames. In a sports world praising success, he became icon of life's resilience. Hero not just for shots, but for daring to rise when everything shattered. And from pain's depths, he left a simple yet profound truth. We don't choose wounds, but we can choose how to step forward with them. After conquering physical hell, Bill Walton didn't choose rest. He chose to return to life, but in a completely different way. No more court, no more dunks or cheers. Now he appeared before millions through a microphone. ESPN and Pac-12 Network invited him as commentator, and from the first broadcast, his deep, spontaneous, philosophical voice stunned America. Bill didn't comment games like others. He told stories, philosophized, joked, spoke of love, music, nature, life, as if every game was a spiritual journey. When a player scored, he yelled, "That's life, baby!" When a team trailed, he sighed, "Sometimes the universe teaches us through pain." And at halftime, he laughed loudly, talking Grateful Dead, hippie vans, days bedridden but surviving on music. Colleagues called him basketball's last free spirit. But behind those laughs was a truth few knew. The titanium spine still tormented him daily. Before every broadcast, he lay backstage half an hour to stretch. Some days, when the red light came on, he still trembled from pain. But through 3 hours of live commentary, no one noticed. When the mic turned off, he sat hunched, breathed deeply to calm. Then he smiled, said the line he never forgot, "I'm the luckiest guy in the world." Fans thought it his trademark, a fun joke. But for Bill, it was prayer. Each time he said it, a reminder that though every joint screamed, he was still alive, speaking, sharing. On TV, he was philosopher, poet, and clown combined. He talked John Wooden in the second quarter, quoted Walt Whitman at minute 37, then sang a Grateful Dead snippet in the third. Fellow commentator Dave Pash once joked, "You can't control Bill Walton, you just love him." Viewers laughed and puzzled, but gradually realized amid those seeming random lines were messages of survival, gratitude, freedom. He said, "Don't live in fear. Play like every day is your last. Love like there's no tomorrow." And outside the studio, Bill's life was strangely simple. He woke early, biked around San Diego, sometimes 30 miles, sometimes just 3, depending if his spine allowed. Lori Matsuoka, his wife of 3 decades, was the light keeping him in the world. She often said, "You don't need to be perfect, just keep smiling." Each morning, when pain kept him bedbound, Lori played Grateful Dead, put her hand on his chest, said, "Listen, there's still a beat, means there's still miracle." He laughed, held her hand, and started a new day. Many asked, after all, where he found joy. He replied, "I learned smiling is the one thing pain can't steal. It's the gentlest rebellion." When honored at a UCLA ceremony, he stepped to the stage, bowed slowly, took the mic, and said, "I once thought happiness was winning. Now I know. Happiness is just sitting here, breathing, seeing faces that still believe in me." The hall stood applauding, not for fancy words, but feeling sincerity in every trembling breath. In later years, Bill became America's storyteller, but the kind you couldn't turn off midway. He talked basketball, but really life. In a 2019 Pac-12 broadcast, during Arizona versus UCLA, he suddenly looked to the stands, saw students laughing, yelling, and said slowly, "Look at them. That's why I'm still here." To remind life is always beautiful, even in pain. That sentence silenced the arena seconds, then erupted in applause. That was Bill Walton turning every pain into an invitation to live. But amid that light lingered hidden sadness. Pain never vanished, just simmered like embers. Some days he crutched to the studio, then lay resting hours after. Lori always beside, quietly helping him up after recordings. And his son, Luke Walton, who followed his father as player, coach now silent companion. They didn't talk much, just shared quiet moments like March 2023 afternoon, father and son sitting watching NCAA tournament. Bill said nothing, just patted Luke's shoulder when UCLA scored. Luke looked at his dad, smiled. In the screen's blue light, their shadows stretched long symbol of an American father-son legacy, a generation passing courage, not through glory, but love. Bill Walton never avoided pain. He learned to laugh with it. He once said, "I lost almost everything, health, career, body, but never faith that life is still worth loving." Everyone who watched him commentate felt it, whether on rock music, Arizona deserts, or a rookie's final shot. Every word carried the breath of a man who nearly left this world, but chose to stay, to tell us living is a privilege. At the end of every broadcast, when studio lights dimmed, colleagues left, Bill stayed a moment. He removed headphones, stretched legs, closed eyes. Pain returned, stabbing in waves, but he smiled, whispered to himself, "I'm still the luckiest guy in the world." That phrase, through years, was no longer slogan but thanks to life, affirmation that though body shattered, his soul never fell. In his final years, Bill Walton lived slowly amid the golden sunlight of San Diego, the place he once called the last paradise of light. But behind the smile and the warm voice that often echoed on ESPN, the silent storm returned. Late 2023, the doctor delivered the news. Colorectal cancer had recurred. This time, the disease was quiet. No press conferences, no bold statements. Bill chose silence. He sent emails to friends, colleagues, students, and close fans. In the message, he wrote briefly, "Live kindly. Every remaining day is a gift. I'm just grateful for having had so much." No one knew it was a farewell, until the messages stopped being answered. The early months of 2024, Bill Walton rarely appeared in public. Lori, his lifelong companion, always by his side, was the only bridge between him and the world. In the brightly lit hospital room, smelling of medicine, she sat by the bed, holding his hand for hours. He was weak, but his eyes still shone. And when talking about John Wooden, about Portland, about the young guys at UCLA, his voice still had the rhythm of an enthralled storyteller. Once, Laurie asked, "Are you scared?" He gently shook his head. "No, I'm just afraid I haven't thanked enough." Then he smiled, the smile that had brought peace to generations of players. The disease progressed quickly. He needed frequent IV drips, his body shrank, skin paled, but his mind remained startlingly clear. Every morning, if strong enough, Bill insisted on going to the garden. Laurie helped him sit on the wooden chair amid the cacti and wild daisies he'd planted the year before. He put on headphones, played Grateful Dead, the familiar Ripple, softly singing along, "If my words did glow with the gold of sunshine." Then he closed his eyes, tilted his face to the sky, letting sunlight touch his paper-thin skin. "I've had a beautiful journey," he said softly. "I've lived enough, loved enough, and forgiven enough." Close friends, old teammates from UCLA, Portland, and Boston visited. Larry Bird sent a handwritten letter. "Bill, if you hadn't been in that locker room back then, I might not be who I am today." Kareem Abdul-Jabbar video, called, speaking slowly, "We played, we laughed, we hurt, and you always taught me that character is bigger than any title." Bill just smiled, replied, "Thanks for going through this journey with me." That was the last time they spoke. In the final days, he hardly spoke much anymore. His body tired, voice hoarse, but his hand still clutched Laurie's tightly. Occasionally, he mentioned Wooden, the long-gone coach, as if conversing with him beyond. "Coach was right," he whispered. "True winning is living kindly." On the night of the 26th of May 2024, the San Diego sky was full of stars, and Bill, despite the pain, wanted to sit up. Laurie helped him to the garden. The two sat in silence. Sea breeze blew gently, and in that moment, no illness, no fear, just two souls listening to Grateful Dead together. Dawn on the 27th of May 2024. As the first rays flooded the window, Bill Walton smiled one last time. Laurie recalled. He breathed softly, opened his eyes, and whispered, "Thanks for everything." Then he held my hand and passed. No cry, no tears on his face, just absolute serenity of a man who had settled all accounts with life. The news spread within hours, and America seemed to hold its breath. ESPN, UCLA, NBA, all aired special programs. The luckiest guy in the world. Millions of viewers, from elders who saw him win in 1977 to kids who knew him only through his commentary voice, all cried. Images replayed the red-haired young man shooting under UCLA lights, the silver-haired man holding a mic talking about life, and finally the frail old man in the garden, smiling at the Sunday. The broadcaster opened the program with his familiar line, "I'm the luckiest guy in the world." At UCLA, students placed flowers around his statue. In Portland, people lit candles along the Hawthorne Bridge. At Boston Garden, the big screen replayed the moment he lifted the trophy in 1986, and thousands stood applauding in silence. In San Diego, local radio played "Touch of Grey" all evening, the song he loved most. Adam Silver, NBA commissioner, said at the memorial, "Bill Walton hurt more than anyone, but he taught us pain doesn't mean failure. He lived by heart and left with gratitude." In the small funeral, no black mourning colors. Laurie requested everyone wear green, the color of UCLA jerseys, the sea, and life. On the screen, moments of his life appeared. The stuttering boy in La Mesa, the student hugging Coach Wooden, the Portland champion, the father watching NCAA with his son, the silver-haired man in the garden. When the final clip showed him practicing walking after the 2009 surgery, the whole room stood applauding. After the ceremony, Laurie said briefly, "Bill didn't leave. He just went a little farther, to a place without pain." That sentence brought tears to many. That evening, over the San Diego sky, thick clouds parted, revealing bright moonlight. A neighbor said that through the Walton house window, they saw the headphones still on the table and Grateful Dead still playing, as if he'd just stepped out of the room for a walk somewhere where the light never fades. Bill's legacy lies not just in titles, but in how he lived after being shattered. He left a message for America, a nation that worships victory, that sometimes true strength is accepting weakness and turning it into beauty. Luke Walton, his son, said at the memorial, "My dad didn't teach me how to score. He taught me how to get up." And the room fell silent, only small but long applause, like a farewell from an entire generation. The next day, TV stations across the country replayed Bill's last public words from late 2023. "I don't have much time left, but I have enough love. And that's more than enough." Those words now became his spiritual will, a message to those who are afraid, in pain, thinking everything is over. As dusk fell over the Pacific Ocean, the wind carried a distant echo like squeaking sneakers on wood, like the breath of a man who loved life to the end. And somewhere, in the soft-playing Grateful Dead songs, people believe Bill Walton is still smiling. When the final sneaker squeak faded in the wind, that red-haired giant still stood there in America's heart. Legends don't die in silence. They rise again in the echoes they leave behind. Looking back at Bill Walton's journey, I'm not just saddened by his passing at dawn in San Diego on the 27th of May 2024, but also ache for a life that always had to live with fire in his body and still thanked every moment. Walton shot 21/22 in Memphis, 197,344 points, then collapsed in pain, led Portland to 1,977 championship, finals MVP, and became 1,978 MVP, yet that crown cracked when the navicular bone broke, leading to crutches, pills, and lonely nights. Boston opened arms in 1985. With Larry Bird, he relived a 1,986 spring, won Sixth Man of the Year, another championship, and still smiled in the locker room with feet in ice-cold water. The 1,990 seconds, 2000s, spinal pain turned him into prisoner of his own body. In 2009, he accepted major spine fusion surgery with 2 titanium rods, dozens of screws, cried like a child taking his first 2 steps, and uttered a lifelong lesson. "I was in hell and I learned hell has dawned." On ESPN divided by Pac-12 airwaves, amid pain lasting 3-hour lives, he always closed with "I'm the luckiest guy in the world." Not a slogan, but a prayer. At life's end, he chose silence, sent emails, lived kindly, sat in the garden with Grateful Dead headphones, held Lori's hand and said, "I've had a beautiful journey." When ESPN UCLA NBA aired special "The Luckiest Guy in the World," and Adam Silver messaged, "Pain doesn't mean failure," I think America received 3 lessons: gratitude even in adversity, valuing human dignity, mental health, right to kind care, above achievements, and building community through daily kindness. That's how a legend continues leading, even when the final sneaker squeak has faded in the wind.